Okay, here's our lines on there. The line following the incisal of the canine and then matching up with the buccal cusps of the 7. Line drawing on, and the triangular ridges of the lingual cusps, buccal ridges on the buccal cusps, triangular ridges on the molar here. Just put this yellow all on here. Make it nice and hot so that it really sticks to the flat surface that we have here. So here's your contact points on your opposing teeth. On your second buccal cusp, on your molar, it'll hit like this. These are the spots where it'll hit. Sometimes you can get something there, depending on the bite of your particular case. So those are your contact points. So your buccal cusps are going to come right up into here. Touch those two marginal ridges there. Touch those two marginal ridges there. And then your second buccal cusp on your molar will hit in here. The reason why I'm pointing that out is sometimes people are trying to get contact right in the depth of that fossa there. And if you do that, your cusp tip will be way too high. Your contact should be on the cusp ridges of your molar, not the cusp tip. These ones are cusp tip. This is cusp ridges. So now we're going to start with cone. You can see how much wax I put there to make the cone a little broader at the base so that it won't break off. Some people make them too small and they will get broken off when you finally make your contact. So now I've put that on there. You can see it's shiny, which means it's molten. So you really can't add to it at that point. So you can go to the next tooth and start with that one. And it'll give time for the first one to cool down. Once I have something on like that, then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look and see where it's heading. So it's kind of hard to see in there. This is the tip right here, and I'm trying to get to that point on the maxillary, maxillary. So you can see it's a little hard to see, but this is just a little bit distal to where I want to be. So what I do at this point, before it gets too high, is I start building it towards the anterior area a little bit. So I'll put the wax in this direction a bit. Add a little bit like that, and then I close it up and see if it's going in the right direction, which it is. So it just happens to be good. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So if you were a little too mesial or a little too distal, what I tend to do, if I needed to, rather than take anything away, if I was too far mesial, I would just add wax here, like this, to move it back to where I want it to be, and then later I would take a little off the mesial to get rid of it so that's the right size. So you can see this is pretty big. So what I do is I just connect it all the way down to the surface again, so it's nice and strong. And what I want to do is make it contact. So I'm going to put a little more up here. Don't let it touch while it's still molten or it'll stick there. Now I touch it together, and you can see it's leaving a little mark there. That little mark is the mark we actually put on the tooth with the pencil. We have our lines on here for the buccal lingual orientation. So I put it on here, and then you can see from here, this is the wide part of this cusp, right here. So keep that in mind. So this one right here needs to be back so it's pretty much in the middle of that widest part. If you go a little farther either way, it's going to give you trouble finding your contact point. This one here is going to be coming up into this contact point here. So it has to hit the marginal ridge of the distal of the 5 and the mesial of the 6. So keep that in mind as you're adding, because this tooth is a little bit, seems like it shouldn't really contact very well, but it will if you're careful watching what you're doing as you bring your addition up. So I'm going to add it up. And then have a look. And you can see I'm pretty much heading in the right direction there. And I'll put some on the second buccal cusp there. So when you're doing the cone for the second buccal cusp, what I want you to keep in mind is making the height of this in harmony with the tooth that you're building up, not trying to get contact, because again, your contact's going to be on your cusp ridges. Once I bring this up into contact, then your second buccal cusp will be similar in height. See, I was leaning forward there. That's because I want to get at that contact point that's right in the middle of these two. So it's almost there now. You want to make sure this is the right height. Make it touch. Like that. So now you can see that it actually touched, and there's your mark there. So this is probably a little too much towards the lingual. And see how it looks a little bit weak? You don't want to keep working with it in that state, or it could easily break off. So I always add more wax to make it stronger. And once you have the height of this one, you can make this similar. So you can just kind of arbitrarily make it go up like that. So when you're building these cones up and getting yourself into contact with the opposing, keep in mind a very common problem is people are getting too far buccal and their contact point is out in this area out here, which is too far to the buccal. And what that'll do is it'll cause an interference when your patient goes in lateral movements. It'll ride on those cusps, which you don't want it to be. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. So you can see actually on mine, on the molar here, I'm actually a little bit lingual to my marks. So if I can see my marks like you see there, I'm going to add a little bit to the buccal of this cone to get it so that it'll come out and touch there. If you found you can't see your marks, just take a little bit of wax away until you can actually see them. You just push it around when it's soft. Cusp ridges. What you want to keep in mind, these buccal cusp ridges are actually creating this shape that you would see on this 7, for example. That's the shape of this 7 on those cusps. So we're actually creating the same thing. So we're going to be going from the cusp tip down to here, and we're actually going to be making this curved so that it curves the same as what the final tooth shape will be on those things. So when you put this wax on, we're going to put it on here like this. You could have started from the bottom and did it as well. And then what I do is I look at it from the anterior region of the patient's mouth. So I would turn it like this, and I have a look at it and see if that curvature looks like what I want the tooth to look like. And one of the best ways to do that is to compare it with the other side. They're similar, not the same, but they're similar enough that you can get the idea. So you don't want to be over the margin. So wherever that margin is, you don't want any wax over that. But you don't want to see like a little dent in here or a little bump. This should be absolutely undetectable if you ran an instrument across here. So we just want to have it basically in that position. It's not going to be perfect because you may have to adjust it later on. So we just want it looking like that. So you can see from the anterior aspect of this looking down, this is a little over contoured. You can see it has like a little bump. If I bring my instrument up, it's catching right there. This one flows nicely. This one's flowing pretty good. And this one is too soft. We're going to restructure that.
What are you guys doing? Making bridges?
We're making a video here. Like that. So on this one, we're going to actually heat this up a little bit and then blend it in. So you want to try to get this shape of the tooth pretty much what you want for your final shape so that your visual is not thrown off by something that's distorted. Okay, so now we're going to do our cusp ridges on the buckle. So what I do is I add a little bit of green like this. A little bit in here. So what you're doing is you're adding and then you're going to build it up. Because these cusp ridges are sort of a little flatter like that. So they go a little bit flat like this rather than this. This is just your beginning. So what you have to do is you have to build this up, straight up, and then get it a little bit flatter so that the angle of your cusp ridge is not so extreme as this one here. So I'm going to add a little more wax in there. I have to get a contact with my canine. And you're going to leave a little space between this cusp ridge. You're not going to put any wax in here and in here. That's going to be, when you fill in, that's where we're going to put the wax. So you can see from, when you look from the occlusal, these ridges are going out to these corners just beyond the contact. So you have your contact between these two teeth, and then just as you get beyond that contact and start to make the curve, that's where these cusp ridges are going to go. So you do that all the way along for all those teeth, and as I said, just build it up by putting some wax into there and then build it up a little bit straighter. Because what you're trying to accomplish is this. You can see the angle of this cusp and then this one here as well. So we're building this up high enough so that this angle is correct on here and here. See how when I put the wax on here, it kind of went up onto the 3 a little bit. So what you want to do is take this instrument, cut in here a little bit, so you have an embrasure. You have an embrasure between each tooth, right? So we want to create the same thing. So if you follow your instrument resting on there and come around, it'll help you get that curvature. So you want to have a little embrasure there, and then you want to have a little embrasure through there as well. And you're going to have that on each tooth as we wax those. So you can see here, I'm going to build this up right here. And then make them touch. See how this wax here, right? This wax is coming over onto this tooth a little too much, and this one's just a little bit too straight up and down here. You can see this one sort of leans over into this space. So what you want to do is just carve that away to make sure that our embrasure is actually in the right spot. So we'll join those later, but you don't want to have the embrasure sort of creeping over onto one tooth or the other. We'll have to do the same through here eventually. So it started cusp ridges on the molar. Same thing again, just put some wax in there to get in between the teeth. When you get two cusps like this that are on one tooth, it's obviously a little more awkward to do these things, so I just fill it in like what you see there. And then when I want to divide it, I take this and just push it down while it's still warm, like that. Remember earlier we spoke about the contact points here for your cusp bridges. So if you look at this where we put the cusp bridge on here, on your second cusp, see this contact point right here? That's your contact point that you're going to get. So you can also get one on the distal when we put the distal cusp bridge on, but that's what I'm talking about. Your contact point's going to be here and or on this one, but not on the cusp tip.
Could you do it?
We've put in our distal cusp bridge on the second cusp, and you can see now that's almost touching the triangular ridge of the second cusp of your 6. So we'll add a little bit there later. It's almost touching, so I'm not going to add anything at this point. It's not worth it because of the adjustments we'll need to make later. So we have our first buccal cups triangular ridge in here. We took this off the articulator so we can get better footage here. So you can see the curvature of that triangular ridge is convex, not concave. And then if you were had it on your articulator, you're going to put it down together and make sure it doesn't hold the bite open. And see if you have a contact. You may or may not have a contact on the 4. Sometimes you can get it, sometimes you can't. So we're just going to make it shaped like this so it's the correct shape for now. And then later on, as we fine tune the occlusion, we will try and see if we can make it contact. On the 5, same thing. You can see how it's convex in shape. Try to follow your line a little bit, and then close your articulator. You always want to close these while the wax is still soft. And you can actually see on here, a little flat spot right there. That's where this contacts. See that right there? That's where your opposing teeth come in contact there. So that's a lot of contact from here to here. So what we'll do later on is we'll adjust that so that it's not so much contact, because that's too much. But right now it's not holding the bite open, so we can leave it. And your first buccal cusp triangular ridge is going to go on an angle a little bit towards the distal, like this. So triangular ridges always go from cusp tip location to wherever they're going to go. So they never come up and hit a cusp ridge. They always hit the cusp tip. So now that one usually doesn't have any contact, but I recommend that you check it before you add the second one like I'm doing. This one definitely must have a contact. Again, you can see how they're very convex in shape. That's the normal shape of triangular ridge. Now put that together. You'll close your articulator, and then you can look in there through the back and see if you have any contact or not. If you don't have it, you're good. So you keep adding wax until you get something. So this is going to be pretty convex. And you can see how it's sort of angled a little bit towards the mesial or the anterior of this patient's mouth. It's a normal direction for that. And I look inside. You can see we're almost touching now. It's getting really close. So what you want to do is you want to get it so that it touches, and the reason why is if you don't get it touching, and it looks lovely. And then when you get near the end of your waxing exercise and you have to get the contact points that are necessary for your points, and you don't have them, you can really have a lot of alteration to your wax up at that point. So you can see now we have heavy contact in this area. So you can just leave it like that. I tend to leave the dents in there that are caused by the opposing teeth contacting those ridges and cusp tips, because they tell me where those locations are. If I fix them all and make it so it doesn't look like a dent, later on I'm going to have to go look for it and see where it is. So if I just leave it there as it is now, then I can find it easily later on and just add a little bit of wax to make it contact if necessary. I'm just going to put another little one on that last little distal cusp. That's usually non-functional, so I just put it in there so I have something there for a visual for myself. Blue blob though. So I just add like that. You can see it's a little too wide. Once it cools down a little bit, you can push it around if you want. Like that. And what we're going to do now, before we go any further, is strengthen that up so it's attached to there nice and strong. And then you'll check your occlusion. Close your articulator again. And have a look in through the back to see what you have. You see there's no contact on that cone. There shouldn't be any contact on the cones, on the linguals. It's always going to be on the triangular ridges of the linguals. So this one I'm going to put pretty far towards the mesial. If I don't do that, what happens when I join them together with the cusp ridges is there's no room to make a cusp ridge. So I start with that one, put this one pretty far towards the distal. Mesial one's a little bit bigger. So what I do is something like that. And then I check it from inside. Make sure I have no interference from those. And then the usual process of making sure they're strong enough on there. Seal it down so it won't break off. Add a little more to that distal one. So these ones, the height of them is actually a little bit arbitrary. You're going to follow whatever's on the other side, roughly. So we just build them up so that they're in harmony with the buccal tooth a little bit. Because the triangular ridge is our contact point, once we put our triangular ridge in there, we'll be able to see if we need to make this higher or not. Okay, so we started our molar lingual cusp cones. Now those cones don't touch anything. We just build them up until they get to the height of the 7 behind. They're roughly the same height. You can see how far apart they are. The distal one is really distal, the mesial one is really mesial. That's what we need to do to make sure we have room to create the cusp ridges. So you can see now I pretty much have the height of those very similar to the height of the 7. So when we go through this excursion, the patient's going through a lateral excursion, moving their lower jaw to the patient's left. You can see how we get pretty close to those cones going in that direction. So you want to make sure you don't hit. So whatever height you have, you don't want to hit. Otherwise they'll break right off. So when you're doing your lingual ridges on your cones, sometimes what you have to do is take a little bit of this away. Otherwise the red won't show up because there's too much yellow there. Just go in there and cut a bit away. It's hard to make it like this in the beginning because you want it strong enough to survive. So I just cut them in like this. Get rid of that wax. And then we have room, we can put our cuspage like this. And we're doing the same thing as we did for the buccal. We're creating the contour of the tooth on the lingual. So when you're looking at it, you can see here, this is much too much on here. It's overbulk, but that'll probably happen because the wax is dripping around when you're doing. So just heat your instrument up enough that it can peel the wax off, but not so much that it actually melts the wax into liquid wax. Like that. And I'm using this tooth structure under here as my guide, so as I go around, like that. I'm going to do the same thing on the premolars. And keep in mind when you're putting this wax on, whatever angle you do, if I put this wax on like this, the tooth looks slanted like that, right? So you don't want to do that. So just keep that in mind. So if that happens to you, just cut that off. Get rid of that. And put it on so that it's straight. It's not that the tooth is actually crooked, it just looks crooked because of the color. So you want to do this so that that cusp looks straight in that way. Same here. Red, straight up and down. So triangular ridges. So when you're putting your triangular ridges on for your molar on the lingual, you're going to bring this one towards the mesial in that direction. Doesn't look very nice at the moment. You want to have it coming in this direction. A lot of people are making them, for example, straight in towards the center of the tooth, but you want to have it facing forward. The reason why is this contact point here you have. The next one you're going to get on this triangular ridge will be right here. So you have to bring this forward in order to get to the point where the upper tooth will actually contact that triangular ridge. So you just make it nice and curved like that. And then while it's soft, you're going to put it together. So you wait until it gets too hard, it'll probably break. So you can see the contact point there. And you have a contact point there. These are sort of critical contact points on a lower 6. So you have this one and this one. So this one also is going to have to go back in that direction to get the contact. Because the contact point is actually, see this wax here? This is the cusp that's actually hitting that area. So this area right here is hitting these 3 triangular ridges. So that big cusp comes right down in to this area. So we want to make sure you get that. So I don't want you failing because of my video.
It will be fine. This is the best makeup tutorial I've ever seen.
So keep building it up. Try to get it curved so it's convex. Like that. And you see how they're all converging together towards the center of the tooth. Then you're going to close your articulator. See if you get a contact point or not. And I don't see one yet. So we need to get it somewhere in here, so we're going to add a little bit more wax there. That. Close your articulator again. Now we can see a tiny little dent right there. So that's the little dent you want on that triangular ridge. On the lingual of a 4, we're just going to put a little one in there. Dr. Cleghorn likes it red. Put it together. Because you're working on the occlusion, always put it together. Make sure the bite still closes properly. It probably won't get contact on that, so we don't worry about it too much. And I'll go to the mesial lingual of the 5. Again, it's sort of a converging structure, so it's going to come towards the center of the tooth like that. Form, a little bit convex. Close your articulator, and what you'll find, most likely, is you'll have no contact on that triangular ridge, which would be normal. But on the distal lingual, we should be able to get a contact point on that. Same thing, make it converge so that the 3 triangular ridges are all coming together. Close your articulator again. And there's your contact point right there. So now you know you got in the right place. If you didn't get that, it may be that you just didn't build it up high enough, or maybe too far forward towards the mesial of the tooth. So keep that in mind. Your cusp ridges now, green. Just start on the molar. You can start anywhere you want. I'm just going to put something like this. Same as you did on the buccal. It's going to be really triangular looking because you've got to build it up first. You don't want to bring these ridges around to the mesial or the distal too far, because you have to put marginal ridges in there. And the marginal ridges are different color, different function. And when you're wondering why do we use all these different colors for these things, all we want to do is see if you actually read your work. If you read it, you'll have the colors right. If you just arbitrarily pick colors for things, we know. And we don't know if you know whether this is a cusp ridge, marginal ridge, triangular ridge. We don't know, because if you made it red, we're going to wonder, did you make a triangular ridge, or think that this was a triangular ridge or not? So this is why we emphasize the colors. This is mostly for us to see whether when you were reading, you knew that the green ought to be in this place or that place. So there's the beginning of the cusp ridges. You can see from the occlusive view, it's not coming into the triangular ridge or the marginal ridge area. And this one, when we do this, won't be into the marginal ridge area either. So keep that in mind when you're putting the green wax on. Okay. So remember, we got the contact points on those 3 spots there. Once we have them, then we know those are all in the right place, and we can start building our ridge here. So you can see here, I just built up the triangle on each side, and then you can just cut in like this to make your division between the two. Didn't do it here yet, but you can see you just cut in. So you don't really need much wax there, otherwise you're just going to have to take it away again. So just do a little bit like that. A little bit here. You can see the marginal ridges aren't filled in at all. So we'll do that, and when we fill in those marginal ridges, that's when we're going to take care of these spaces between the teeth, because the marginal ridges will do that. Okay. Marginal ridges. We'll do the one on the distal here of the molar. You can make it touch the mesial of the 7. So you have to have a good solid contact there. Don't worry about if it sort of flows up over the 7 a little bit like you see there. You can see it sort of came up here, came up here and use this instrument, you can just cut it away. And then you can cut in here like this to make the division between the two teeth. And then what you want to do now is you want to make sure that this flows in together here. So this is, sort of becomes continuous. And you see how the tooth shape starts to take place here. So once you put your distal marginal ridge in on the 6, put it together, wiggle it around a little bit, take it apart. Most likely you can get a contact right here. So that's as much as you can put in there for wax, so you don't have to add any more wax on that. From this point on, in this area, you're going to be doing filling, and the filling will make everything nice and smooth in these areas around here. So we'll go ahead and do the mesial of the 6. This one, you can sort of do the two of them together. So put the wax on like that, so it's covering the space between the two teeth. Because these teeth aren't coming out, you can do this. I'm just going to add like this. Join it out in this area here. And once I have that all filled in like that, I let it cool down so it's not molten. Once it gets a little bit satiny looking, you know that it's cooled down enough that you can put this together. Close your articulator, wiggle it a little bit, and see if you have a contact. If you don't, keep building it up because you should be able to get one. Let it cool down a little bit. Rather than waiting, you can always add between your two premolars here. Same thing, you can straddle the two teeth like that with your wax. Cool down a little bit, put them together. Just wiggle it a little bit like this. See if you got any contacts. If you don't worry about it too much at this point. But now you can see through the buccal, you can see now we have contact between the two teeth. And the contact point is back in here, not out buccal. And you can see here on the lingual, same thing. The way that your tooth is shaped as it comes around, that's where your contact point starts between those two teeth. So start filling in right down into the deep area where you have no wax in there yet, hopefully. What you have to keep in mind is you don't want to mess up your triangular ridges. So you're trying to avoid them a little bit. So what I do is that. Lay that wax in like that. And then I use this instrument here. This thing works quite well. So once this cools down enough so that you can carve it, then you can go in with this. And then keep a division between the mesial or the lingual and the buccal. And I put something like a little triangular ridge on here just to make this a little bit distinctive. Like that. Doesn't need much. It's not functional. But you know the rule by now. Anything you do put on occlusely, you always check it, closing your articulator. Wiggle it a little bit, see if there's any contact, and there isn't, so you're safe. So now you can keep going and filling in between the two triangular ridges on the lingual of that molar. So take some wax, put it in there, Don't put a lot of wax in, that way when it shrinks it'll actually shrink down and create a fossa. So now I'll go to the buccal area there, put some in between here. And as you know, the wax that I use is magic and it always does what it's supposed to do. So yours might not go as smoothly as this, but it'll get there in the end.
It's not the wax, it's you. Believe in yourself.
Yeah. So you can see, just keep filling in. Don't put too much in there. And then you'll automatically have your fossa area and depressions are already forming by themselves. Like that. And once that cools down and it's solid enough to work with, then I will use this to carve some. And then this is also quite handy as well. The discoid into this. Just go in beside your triangular ridges like this. And you can shape those pretty good like that. And then where these marginal ridges meet, what I usually do is make it a little bit broader there. So I add a little bit of wax towards the distal of that marginal ridge like this. And then I add a little bit to the mesial of this one. And then I use the cleroid and then go through with it like this. You can use almost anything you want actually, but just carve through, and that makes the separation between the two teeth. So if you look at that from the buccal, you can see this cut through here dividing those two teeth. So you do the same between the 4 and the 5. Same way, make the marginal ridges a little bit broader, and then just cut in between them to separate the two teeth. But if this is too narrow, when you cut it, it'll actually disappear. There won't be enough wax there. So always add a little more here, a little more there to make it wide enough so when you cut through like that, it actually has something left behind. In here
Yeah,
now?
sure.
Yeah? Cool. All right. So fill in here. And you can see if you have your red wax straight up and down, the tooth looks nice and straight, but if you have this a little bit slanted, your tooth will actually look slanted. So you can straighten it out at this point. Let's say if you had too much red wax and it was on a slant, you can take some away from here, and you can change the orientation of it, make it look a little straighter. So I always use the remaining tooth as part of my guide for margin. You don't have to use something sharp like this to do what I'm doing here. You can use your beaver tail or something, it'll work pretty good too. This one I don't even think I need any wax, so I'll just heat that. Let those cool down a little bit and then go in and just lay this instrument right on the remaining tooth structure and then use it to blend this in. And once you have it the shape that you want, you can then use nylon or something and smooth it out. You can use your finger as well. Smooth a lot of what you're doing here with your finger. Like that, and it'll come out pretty smooth. And clean all this stuff away. Keep a brush handy to do that. Yeah, so that looks pretty reasonable like that. And it's a little trickier to do the lingual fill-in because it's just more awkward to get at those areas. As you probably already know, getting your color or the temperature of your wax right makes it so much easier to control everything. And once you have that done like that, go back in with your instrument and just make sure there's no wax over your margin. So just follow the remaining tooth. Yeah. And this one's for sale.
Equals the tuition fees.
Yeah. For a foreigner. I want the big bucks.
International students.
International student fees, yeah. So same here, we didn't go through here. And at the very end of your exercise, when you have this tooth looking, these teeth looking like you feel they ought to be for form and most of your contacts, what I do to establish my contacts and to confirm that I have them is I heat an instrument up, and you can see here that this is a flat spot here where there is obviously a contact at some point. And over time, because you guys are doing these over a number of weeks, this could have shrunk away and now there's no more contact. So what I do is I take an instrument and I heat it up really hot and I just go in like that and touch it, and it causes the wax to come up into like a little convex shape rather than concave. Then when you close your articulator and take it off, you'll have a dent. And that dent is the spot that your contact point is. And you just do that in all your strategic spots here, on your ridges, either mesio, distal, or both. These three triangular ridges, that triangular ridge. So you'll just confirm them all doing that. I don't recommend using the powder to indicate where your contacts are, because I find the powder doesn't come off cleanly when you're all done, and you could have really nice looking teeth and then powder it for checking occlusion, and then you'll never get it clean again.
What about the
And you'll,
articulated paper?
and you'll cry. Yeah, articulated paper is good. That'll work fine. It's a little awkward. Your contact points should be in red on there, so you use the black side down to do that. And then here, it'll just be a little awkward because it's green. It might be hard for it to show up. But again, just use, just wherever your little flat spot is, just put a little bit of wax in. As soon as you see that little dent happen again, you know you have it.
Cusp tip not defined.
So if your cusp angles or cusp root angles are not correct for you, let's say they're a little bit flat like this, what you want to do is you just want to take this instrument and just go down and cut it away more down towards the marginal ridge area like this, and then you can change the angle of this and make the tooth look more pointed without actually increasing the height. That's something you can do near the end like this. I would normally use a brush to brush some of that away. And then through here, between these two cusps, you can cut in here to make it a little more pronounced like that. That makes them look a little steeper. And here, cut in here. So whatever you need to do to keep it in harmony with the remaining teeth.